Once again, Donald, it's really a pleasure to have you here today with us. Thank you so much for joining and taking the time to come and speak at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. I know you're very busy with your schedule at MasterCard, and I know it's really early morning for you in New York. And so a big thank you for joining us in this such a hot topic.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me a second time. Apologies to everyone who tried to dial in last week where, sometimes technology still fails us even in 2020. But thanks, Ashka, for the nice words. And Luis, it's great seeing you and great talking. Looking forward to this conversation. And hello, everybody.
Thank you very much. So yes, the topic today is it's a very hot topic, especially around private companies and it's experience versus product, and we really wanted one of the most, if not the most knowledgeable and successful leaders in this domain to come and talk to us a little bit about what does that really mean, as also for us as an organization as we're transforming as an organization. I think this was a really important topic to bring up. But before we go and deep dive into the topic, I really would love to spend some time hearing about your journey, and how, you were the first Chief Experience Officer hired by MasterCard to drive experience thinking, drive experience with the organization. It's a unique, right? So tell us a little bit about what you do, and also a bit about your journey as a Chief Experience Officer.
Sure. I've been kind of in this role in different places. Luis and I used to work together years ago at this point, at a company, Sapient and Sapient Nitro. But I'll really focus me mostly on my time at MasterCard so far in the last year and a half. So a Chief Experience Officer and the Chief Experience is a new role for MasterCard. And for those of you that know the business, one of the things I always say is when I start talking about MasterCard to other people, I always start with, I can't help you with your credit card payment. I can't change the rates. I can't help you with a late payment, so to speak. All of those things are held by the banks, if you know the brand, but the banks actually hold the relationship with the consumer. MasterCard has realized, and MasterCard is the technology company that powers payments in the background, from the bank to the consumer to the merchant, etc. So we're a very well-known consumer brand, but a lot of our direct interaction is not direct with consumers. It's through merchants and governments and other forms of payment providers that then get to the end consumer. MasterCard realized a few years ago that they needed more end user, I'll use that expression, consumer-centric thinking in everything they do. As technology is changing the world and their business continues to grow, as less people use cash, and now many more people use, whether it's PTM or a card or whatever, instead of cash, that's their business and their growth engine. Making sure they are totally laser focused on how do their products sit within the end users that use them is paramount. They realized in an opportunity space, they also realized by designing a few products that maybe didn't work so well, that from the design aspect, 5 years ago didn't work so well, but also from the value proposition. Was it something a consumer really wanted? So they realized that experience was a vehicle for growth for them, and something that they needed to catalyze change across the company and with all of their partners. So they started a search for and realized that they needed someone to help change the culture of the company, change how they're thinking about the products, and actually focus on great design in the products itself. So it's been very interesting. A lot of my role is the majority, I'd say, product focused. So looking at some of the biggest products that we have, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those. A lot of the role is services focused, and a lot of the role is cultural change across the company and making sure that everyone understands the power of experience. I'll use air quotes because we're going to unpack it in this conversation, and understands the business value that it brings. So that is always something I hammer home on. It's nice to talk about great experiences. Everyone gets excited about it. but there's real business value within that, and that's for me the truly exciting thing. So cultural change, product design, sales. I also feel that talking and really having a actionable and impactful conversation around impact in the experience is a great way to go to market. And it's a great way, I think, do a lot of work now with MasterCard as we approach different partners to not just talk about the capabilities, but talk about the value of the experience and how those capabilities will sit for any end user. So I hope that makes sense, at least as an intro, but it's a very interesting, and exciting year and a half so far.
Very good. It's fantastic. It's a really interesting role, and all the points you're mentioning are really very familiar to us when you talk about impact and talk about affecting culture, the role of experience. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting conversation today for all of us. You quote many times, is a quite fantastic quote that I'd like to bring up here. It's a fantastic quote. I find quite relevant for companies today, and the thing you just mentioned today as well about MasterCard. And surely for us as well in the healthcare domain, in pharmaceutical, as we move from beyond the pill, as we move from the RX space, this prescriptive medicine, to OTC space. So a lot of this notions of where the company is moving is very much in line with this quote that I will now mentioning to you that someone said, and I don't know who it was, but you're probably going to be able to let us know. The experience of the product is bigger than the product itself. So I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about this inspiring quote.
It's not so much a quote. It's something I use now all the time in conversations like this. It came from some research that I think Bain did 2 years ago, surveying 150 business leaders who now agree that the experience of the product is bigger than the product itself. I love to use it in conversations within MasterCard with our partners to unpack, like, what does that really mean? And the experience is bigger and more valuable. So let's think about that. So in product companies, MasterCard is a product company, Dr. Reddy's is a product company. Like, as we think about what the product is, expanding our mind to think about how the customer really values that product. So, and that quote helps, I think, justify and talk about what experience-based thinking is. The experience of the product is bigger than the product itself. We're in a payments company, which is about a transaction. So thinking, and you can get really laser focused about getting out of a taxi and having the transaction paid for, or using Paytm at a cafe and buying a coffee, and that's another type of transaction with another partner. Thinking about, okay, do we want to be just focused on that moment, or how does that moment sit within the users and the persons? It's a person at the end of the day, their life. What happens before? What happens after? The experience of a Tesla is very different than just a car. And that's another wonderful example in looking at what traditional cars are, and then you look at what Tesla has done. So yes, it's electric, battery power, there's a whole number of different features, but they're a company, and this will come up later on, I think, as we're talking, that understands the value of experience. It's the whole aspect of what does it mean to own a Tesla, how does it feel, etc. It means it's not just what the product does for you, it's how it feels. And Ashka kind of teed that up in the introduction. Experience at the end of the day is a feeling. So you and I can use the same product to do the same thing, and we can have very different experiences. It's just dependent on what we need it for, our state of mind, what we're expecting, what we put into it, and what we take away. But true experience-based thinking means you're starting to understand, how does a product feel? Did it do what I wanted? Did it do it easily? Did it surprise me and delight me, and all of those things? And that's what I mean by, like, the experience of the product is bigger than just the functionality. It works. The last thing I'll say, this type of quotes or this type of thinking works well when I am interacting with people who are largely thinking the capability, the technology in my case, But the product is more than just the capability. It's how it sits, and that's widening to think about the experience of that product is actually more valuable, because sometimes the products can be very similar. Really at the core, it's like, what is one thing? Does that make sense? And we'll talk when we get some questions. I hope it makes sense to everyone else, but it is a great way of thinking in today's world, that what the product does, how it sits within your journey, how it feels before, during, and after, maybe how it doesn't feel if you're not even thinking about it, and some products work that way. That's the real value of the experience of the product, is bigger than just the features and functions. Because I think 20 years ago, we just thought features and functions and what it did.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's very, very relevant, and it's almost like a prelude to really the subject of this evening or your morning. That is this experience versus product, right? So into 21st century, really, it's the focus has shifted, as you mentioned it just now, right? What it was maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago is not the same today. So how do we really move from a product-focused company to an experience-focused company, right? Even in terminology, right? We had this terminology around the MVP. Now we talk about MUP. So for people not familiar, minimum viable product or a minimum usable product. Designing is everywhere, but also bad design is everywhere. So how does experience design, or this sort of experience thinking that you're talking about, and custom experience can answer the way how we look at product companies?
So I think one thing, I'll just go back to the terminology you just used, minimum viable versus minimum usable. Both are helpful, but is that really the ingredients for success in today's world? There's another one, I think you've probably heard this, that I like to use with my colleagues and partners and customers, is minimum lovable. Because minimally viable, and if we're all shooting, we use that expression a lot in MasterCard, and now we're trying to raise the bar, but we use the expression a lot because it just talks basic features. But is basic features enough for any product, whether it's healthcare or digital or whatever it might be? Is it really enough to just do minimally viable, when in reality, what you need to do is give something to the consumer, the customer, that actually separates it? So the minimum lovable, in a way, is actually a better way of thinking, like, what's the minimum aspect of service that you're going to put into it to make sure that it really is great? It doesn't just do what it was going to do in a basic way. There's some great illustrations. I'm thinking, I'll try to describe it, of how do different companies think about features and adding features. And do you want to think in a Spotify kind of way or an Apple kind of way? This device, if you remember when it came out, this phone was just a phone. Actually, it doesn't look much different today than it did when it came out. But every iteration that Apple places on this device adds not just features, but the lovability. And it started in its simplistic kind of form that has grown, but it has worked, versus other companies just add feature upon feature and end up with a product that is loaded with features, but they're not thinking clearly around the experience. So I love to think around, what are the services you can add, and even in its minimum state, does it do something and do something better than its competitors? I'll add one other thing, is there's a really interesting evolution going on within MasterCard. Our senior leaders talk about experience. Our CEO-elect, he talks about our products, our experiences. I actually think what he means is our products enable experiences. Payments enable you to do all different things. Buy groceries, pay for a taxi, take a trip. But our president of technology, we're a technology company, the networks and other things, he likes to talk about experiences are what we innate, like our products are experiences. He started moving away from MVP to talk about MVE, minimum viable experience. And that's the kind of interesting thinking that he's trying to unpack with engineers, all over the company, that it's not just features and functions and how it sits within the person who uses it.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I think what you're talking about, and the terminology and how we bring lovable and the aspect of experience, in things that before were kind of a given, as the features, the technology of the product, and now add the element of human, right? This is what we're talking about here, is really well the element of humanizing or make it more connected, and as you were mentioning before, it's not just about the product, but it's sort of the whole landscape around the product, and how does that affect us in our lives and make us the experience more delightful or lovable. And with that in mind, I have a couple of questions around how businesses are transforming. So let's say that not so long time ago, like 20 years ago, business was assumed to achieve success through high quality product, things like you mentioned before, the value for the buck, the best customer service they could give. Now today we add all this complexity of AI, automation, machine learning. So people, companies are buying data companies and are buying huge data to set up some sort of predictable patterns around consumers, around users. But in terms of like product companies, and how we start now, as you mentioned, with defining a little bit and changing a bit the value in today's market landscape about what's real value for us in a product company. Can customer experience or the experience of the product be our new currency?
Mm-hmm.
We, start looking into build stronger competitive advantages, as you're mentioning before, but instead of just the product and the features, start really thinking about, defining the value in that currency through the experience, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know a little bit, you have such a vast experience on this domain, not just in North America, but globally. Mm-hmm. How have you seen this, evolving globally? Is there any companies that, popped up as sort of examples of companies that are doing well? And I'm sure MasterCard is one of our benchmarks, but with you there. But in terms of, how you have seen this, evolving in the new landscape globally, how would you define this new value for companies?
So I'll say a few things, and you made quite a few great points in that. You talk about a product company, you're a product company, we're a product company, but I like to say there is no product company. We're not it's kind of being contrarian, but the point is, and maybe you're not a product company, you're a service company, because behind every product, there's a service. And changing the orientation to think about what is the service this product provides, that's the real value. Sometimes experience, I think, talking about, the customer experience or just using this word that we're using a lot, gets very soft in business value terms. People think it's experiential or user experience digital, and it does include that, but it's so much bigger. But really talking about the value and saying behind every product, there is a service. What's the service we're providing to the end user? What is, in design thinking terms, and I think you guys are talking a lot around design thinking, what's the job to be done? What's the job to be done for the end customer? And then how does the service that product provides help that? And that begins to unpack like the experience-based thinking without using the words experience. If we just think about product, we end up thinking about, and again, MasterCard is a product company. We had a chief product officer. Now they've actually gotten rid of the role just this year. But it's almost blasphemous to say, are we really a product company? When my point is the products provide services, and let's start thinking about that. And that's another way into thinking about the real value of experience and getting towards, okay, we have payment products, but let's think about the jobs to be done, because consumers don't think that way. Do I want to pay directly from an account or from a debit card? They just think I need to pay Luis, and I need to pay the cost of coffee, and I need to pay X and Y. So there's different types of payments. One's a merchant, one's a person, one might be bill pay. That's how we think in MasterCard, but the job to be done is just pay bills, manage my money, get coffee, etc. And really thinking about the journey helps get into the a realm of experience that I think is the most valuable. So I'd encourage you all to think about, if you strip the word product and capability and thought about service and what are the core services we're enabling through the products, how would that change and how would that unlock new value areas that maybe competitors aren't thinking about? So I think there's some very interesting companies that are doing this. I think some of the digital giants globally are doing it and doing it well. I also think some of the challenging brands, I think one company that I was looking into recently, from a global financial services, Fidelity, they've really done an amazing transition. And I had a few personal experiences in moving my, retirement account to, and I was like, wow, they are really customer centric, and really understanding customers and what are the key jobs to be done and how do they support that and how do they change the culture internally has really greatly helped. I actually think some of the Asian brands, in thinking about some of the super apps, Gojek and other things, are very interesting. Now they're loading in a lot of features and functionality, and yet they are doing it in a way that consumers are bought into the ecosystem, and suddenly it's opening up more and more doors. So I think there's brands that are big and small that are starting to realize this and move in different ways. Another one I think is a wonderful transition globally is Walmart. That is a company that 10 years ago I think was laggard position and now is in leader position for thinking about, they have a chief customer officer, but they're thinking about the role their brand and all of their services plays with the people they serve, and continuing now to innovate with digital at the core, but it's also a mixed brick and mortar and digital kind of service overall. But those are some of my thoughts there.
Great, yeah. Picking up what you're saying, you were mentioning before the impact of experience in businesses. And attached to that, I've got another question, but I think that's a very important question when you talk, especially with business leaders, and to kind of bring it the understanding, how could you experience really bring an impact? We mentioned about the values, is the new currency experience now, and no more features or product. Also attached to that, is there key ingredients that companies should start thinking about for change, to kind of move towards a company that will be successful, that will thrive in the 21st century? What would be, in your experience, the 2 or 3 ingredients that they should start doing?
The first thing that comes to mind, and this might feel, I'm not going to apologize for it, it might feel kind of obvious, but it's not, is the ingredients for the companies that are constantly researching and testing and exploring. So I think to really get experience right and get product design right, we won't always get it right. So admitting that you're going to have a lot of good ideas internally, but they may not be good ideas externally. So I think a hallmark of a company that is designing services through products and services, that is constantly explore, research, test, and designing, I use the expression, are you designing for a customer or are you designing with them? And finding ways to do that in really simple, quick, agile ways doesn't mean you do a lot of design thinking and then go out and test for 6 weeks or 6 months. You're doing it simultaneously. And we at MasterCard in the last year are using a lot of cloud-based tools, research tools. You can do a hand sketch in a product design and test it in 2 days. To do 2 different ones and get, through cloud-based tools, but, insights, and that's just one example. But constantly looking and exploring and understanding an idea might not work the way it's manifested, but if you just pivot a little bit, that it might work brilliantly otherwise. And in that conversation, that for me is where the conversation and interaction with the user, that's where the real, I think, insight for innovation comes, because we don't think the way a consumer thinks overall. I also think, thinking about data. So that's one form of data. Test, learn, could be quantitative and qualitative, but really understanding what data does any company have on what products worked, what didn't, and really beginning to tap data-driven products that are informed by larger amounts of data and understanding kind of what is working and what isn't, and really designing in that respect. So those are two hallmarks, I think.
Great. Very contextual to to what's going on today is COVID-19, right? That kind of and as we in the experience domain and design domain, we need to remain contextual. We need to be connected with the users in Dr. Reddy's, with the patients that we design for, with our customers. That actually the term customer in pharmaceuticals is really partners or clients many times in the retail or other sort of business functions. But yeah, as to be connected today in today's world with COVID-19, a lot of things have changed, right? There's a profound change in the way we do business today. There was sort of a really urge to digitalize most of all of our interactions, to go virtual. It was abrupt and disruptive, really. There was this fear and uncertainty with our health and the health of our loved ones that created a huge impact. Somehow united us, but also somehow separated us with digitalization and working from home. And so in the start of this decade, we kind of see a lot of things evolving for businesses, the way we build a relationship to our clients, with our customers, with our patients. Will this, this pandemic crisis that hopefully will come to an end soon, or will not, and will just become a norm, a way of living? But will this make, in your perspective, us become more human-centric in our businesses? It will push us to do more of that. Will push us to innovate, to what you just mentioned before about being more innovative when you test and connect more with the user and the patient. Will help us to be more ethical as well in the products or service we design. I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on this.
Sure. So that could be a topic for an entire session, I think, and probably a couple sessions, in the sense of we're months into this pandemic. Hope everyone is safe and sound. I'll start with that. There's a statistic that a colleague of mine found from a research firm and there's different ones that fit this, but it says it takes 66 days to form a new habit for humans. 66 days of doing something differently, whether it's counting your steps, eating differently, whatever it is. 66 days for that really start to become a habit. And let's think about how long we've been living in a different world, either working from home or doing all different things based on concern, anxiety, fear, inability to do things the way we used to. What are the habits that we have ingrained now, because it's been a lot longer than 66 days, that are going to stay with us? What are the habits in not going certain places? And this is one thing I want to call out, is that the pandemic is not affecting us all equally. So it's really important, as we think about kind of market by market, customer by customer, really getting to meaningful differences around user types, from elderly people to what's going on in US versus India, different parts of India, what's going on in other markets, et cetera. What's going on even with people of a different race here in the US, it's not affecting people equally. So starting to get a little bit one step closer and understanding what are the meaningful differences and how can we support those. But I'll call out a couple things. So there's so many, when we're doing research at MasterCard, that we're updating every 2 weeks to looking at existing consumer behavior. What are people saying they're doing? What are people saying they're missing the most? What do they plan to be doing? And then tracking it every 2 weeks. Very interesting. I'll call out one aspect, and that is hygiene. So in the beginning of the pandemic, at least in the US and other people were so focused on not wanting to touch things and just, masks and gloves and things, and contactless as a form of payment. So let's get rid of money. Let me use a card. But even when I'm using a card, I don't want to touch things. Let me use. And different markets are in different states of maturity around using contactless. Within the US, we had amazing adoption in a few short weeks of people using contactless payment, whether it be a phone or card. Now, I think that's one little microcosm. Hygiene cause, I don't want to touch things. I think that might last. People are more conscious of germs in different forms. That doesn't go away so easily. I think that actually, and other research we're doing is proving this, that's starting to unearth a whole new type of user experience that I call not just contactless in a moment of a transaction, but touchless journeys. And thinking about what's caused by hygiene. I don't want to interact with people. I'd like to do it all on my own. I'd like to pay on my own. Just give to actually maybe when hygiene becomes a little bit of a back of mind and not front of mind, it actually raises the opportunity to empower consumers to do things entirely on their own, touchless. So just go in a whole journey, buy online, pick up on store, and actually never interact with anybody. And that actually think, aside from you do want service from a person when you need it, but that is very empowering for a consumer. Think of when we had the volcano that erupted in Iceland in 2010, it was a great catalyst for getting consumers to adapt airlines' mobile apps for rebooking because they couldn't get through on the phone. So suddenly you had a crisis forcing people to change a new behavior. And then people realized, oh, I can do all of this on my phone. Why do I need to call the call center? Why do I need to go to the gate agent to get a boarding agent? I can do it all on my own. So moving hygiene is causing a new behavior around contactless that I think is moving towards touchless. And then you look at these new examples of like the Amazon Go store. I can go into a whole store, put stuff in my bag and walk out and never interact with someone. Now that might sound frightening. I imagine there's people on today's discussion that's saying, well, what if I want to interact with someone? I'm not saying service shouldn't be there from humans when you need it, but maybe it's not actually just to check you out and run the things to the register, because it's very empowering for me to just do it all on my own as long as it was well designed and whatever else. So that's, I think, how COVID is causing one set of behaviors that might evolve into something else that is entirely empowerment is a big driver of great experience. Can I do it on my terms when I want, whatever it might be? And I think I'll close with, that's only one dimension. Understanding the different nature and healthcare is so important. People's orientations towards hygiene and fear and anxiety, that is very emotional. And as I think what we were saying, experiences are emotional. It's how did something feel? So the more we're staying close to the different core types of people we serve and what are their journeys and what are they thinking, the more important it is. So hope I put out a few things to answer that question, but it's a really rich topic. And it's one that deserves us monitoring 6 weeks, 6 months, year, and from there, because I think we're going to see a great change as a result of this in the longer term.
Absolutely. Very, very great to hear your perspective. I think it's very enlightening. With that in mind, I have one last question. Is not so much of a question, is sort of I wanted to pull one of these amazing projects you've been working on at MasterCard. It's a fantastic product. It's called Doconomy, if I'm pronouncing this right.
I'll explain it. Yeah, Doconomy instead of economy. It's the Doconomy. Yeah,
Doconomy. And you own a pencil that's one of the biggest and most prestigious design awards in the world. When I looked at it and I saw it, I really found was a true experience first product or service product with experience. And now that we talked about all this in our talk today, it really feels that connects the needs of humans and with the global context, with climate change, with the future economies. I really would love to have you explain to us what the economy is and what was your role and how important this product is for MasterCard today. I will also ask Ashka if you could please put a few slides that Donald has shared with us so we can explain to us this experience in this product.
Sure. So I'll describe what the product is. This is one product. So Luis, thanks for your excitement. It's one of the ones that I'm most excited about. So much of the work we do in products is advancing a new product and iterating and make. This is a product that is, I think, in my view, entirely new. It's a whole new category for consumers and for MasterCard overall. There we have. Stay on this image for just a moment, and then there's the kind of where it was and where it is. So this is a sustainability product that MasterCard is building. So how can your purchase behavior, how can your payment behavior do more than just payments? How can it actually help you be a better you? I call these are products with a conscience. It's conscience. It's helping you, like Fitbit helps you be a better you by counting your steps, or your Nest, if you have one of those that controls the temperature in your home automatically. It's helping you save money and use heat and air conditioning or whatever to the best ability without wasting things. It's smart products, conscience. This product, for those of us, hopefully, that are at least concerned about climate change, one of the biggest issues we've seen is people are concerned about it, but they don't always know what to do, and they don't understand what they can do at an individual level, how that can contribute to the greater good. So we partnered with the Duconomy. The company you mentioned is actually a fintech, a Swedish fintech that we partnered with and invested in. They have a database and are building a database of products. Just like there's products, you scan a barcode, it goes into some central database of a product, and you can usually get basic information around it. Now there's a database that records the carbon footprint of many products out there, whether it's a pair of Nikes or whether it's something else. What is the carbon footprint of what that product costs to make? So what if you voluntarily, and if you're concerned about climate change, what if you actually had a card that helped you take action? Move from concern, but what do I do to take action? What if you could set your own carbon footprint limits for the day or for the week or the year, and your card could help you make better purchasing decisions? So that's the idea, and it's, as I said, it's a whole new category of cards that don't exist. It's not even a card, I shouldn't use that word because the card's going away. But it's a payment product that helps you be a better you. If you could go back just to the initial screen, go back one. So what you saw there was the alert that said, there we go, transaction denied, you've reached your carbon limit. This is what the product was in its infancy, and I like to flash the screen up because this was the idea. And in conferences and when we're live, people react to this like, oh my God, what if my card actually didn't let me buy a product because I've exceeded my limit? It gets the point across, but what we're working on, my team right now in MasterCard, is that's not really, I think, viable. And how many of us would really like a card that's going to slap our hand and not let us do the shopping? Maybe you need to buy those, whatever it is. So that gets the idea across. If you go to the next slide now, this is where we are. So we're taking it from minimum viable, which maybe is a perfect example, to minimum lovable through research, design, testing, valuing. And since this is a brand new product of all different category, what we're trying to understand is on the right-hand side, maybe it's not letting you buy products, but maybe it's encouraging you to stay below your carbon footprint. So doing it in a more positive way. Maybe it's rewarding you and giving you badges. What we're trying to do also is figure out, how do consumers think about carbon footprint? There's no units like steps. Everybody gets steps. How many steps have you taken? We all take steps all day long for Fitbit. But what we're doing now is trying to figure out how to translate carbon footprint into something that is comprehensible. And the carbon footprint of booking a plane is very different than a pair of Nikes, is very different than buying sustainable fruit and vegetables from a local food stand. So we're trying to actually test, learn, optimize, how am I tracking, and giving people positive benefits, maybe the ability to compete or compare with UN standards. And then we're looking into, if we do want a card product, can it be made of reusable, sustainable materials? But how do we think of the whole value chain? And lastly, how do we think about rewards points that I might get for using my card, and translating those points into what we call priceless planets? So it's a program that MasterCard has with a number of partners that allows you to plant trees with your rewards points. So that is the idea. What you saw on the first screen was kind of the initial proof of concept, got people thinking, but it's not really, I think, a viable product. Through great experience design, test, research, optimize, thinking about comprehensibility, we're now designing this whole new category of products. And I think we'll see more of these that don't exist today, that through our purchasing behavior give us an insight into whatever it is that we want to do. maybe greater change. So that's what I call, it's a brand with a purpose. This can be issued by any bank across the nation, but it's allowing you to move from concern to individual action all day long, just like Nest does and Fitbit does. But in this case, it's taking action for the planet. So hopefully that makes sense, but it's and it comes across. Luis, I thank you for your excitement, but I'm personally excited. We're working with Duconomy, which is the Swedish fintech that is really pushing this, but we are their primary partner in the
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I love all of it. I love this conscious science that you come up with. I think it's a great example. It's also a great example for us. I mean, at 5B in the engagements we have with Dr. Reddy's, the things we're trying to drive also in the service space. This is definitely something that we should look up to. I think there are a lot that comes around the experience and the designing experience for products and service that needs, in today's world and passing all this pandemic, that needs to have a higher impact in not just as individuals, but also us and the planet we live in. And I think it's really a beautiful product and how it's stitched, our consciousness, the science, the technology, the experience, and sort of the experience first and the human together. I think it's lovely.